hereby call the Board of the Prior Lake Savage Area Schools into session. Call to order, and we'll start out with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All members are present with the exception of Mary Franz tonight. Next on the...
Stacy Rule.
Oh, Stacy Rule, thank you very much. So we do have quorum. Next on the agenda is the approval for the agenda. Do I have a motion for the approval of the agenda?
So moved.
By Lee, do I have a second?
Second.
By Ben. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? That passes 5-0. Next on the agenda is the Truth and Taxation portion of our meeting. Presenter tonight is Executive Director of Business Services, Biz Sink.
Good evening. Tonight is the final levy certification, and as part of that certification, we will be reviewing several different items. If I can get this to work here tonight. So as part of the agenda, we'll be reviewing the tax levy calendar, our basic school funding, the factors contributing to the levy change, our certified 17 pay 18 levy, and some graphical analysis. So the authority for school levies must come from either by state formula, the legislators set those state formulas, or they're voter approved. And the basic formula for calculating our state aid is our authorized total revenue minus the local property taxes the remainder would be our state aid. Some impacting factors for the changes, those issues that are driven by our state level, any changes in levies determined by state formula, that would be a legislative change. Changes in our sales ratio impacting our adjusted net tax capacity. Laws mandating any code compliance, such as our long-term facility maintenance. And then there's issues determined by district voters, voter-approved bond referendums or excess levy referendums. And then any local factors, so inflationary pressures on the real estate market, abatements, property improvements not previously taxed, such as new homes, change in an individual assessed market value, and then a possible change in classification, such as the homestead to rental. So what is included in tonight's district levy certification? Those voter-approved referendums, we had some from prior years, and then the most recently approved bond and levy from the November 7th vote. And then levies set by state formula. So there's several listed there, our equity, operating capital, transition. And then we have those levies authorized for local need. And those would be our reemployment insurance, safe schools, career and technical, facility leases, integration, QComp, and OPEB. So as we've talked about, and this hasn't changed since the preliminary levy, but our adjusted net tax capacity increased 3.7%, and the referendum market value increased almost 7%. We are a growing school district, so we have increased pupil units, and that affects our levy as well. Our OPEB, you can see that the board authorized almost $140,000 in retiree insurance. The voter-approved bond and levy from November 7th. This is the market value analysis, and again, this hasn't changed from our preliminary levy. The most recent information we have is from 2016 information, and you can see that our referendum market value in the district continues to increase. And the same is true for our adjusted net tax capacity. And we show both of these items because bonds and levies are spread across either our adjusted net tax capacity or the referendum market value. And so we want to show both of those options here. And then we show our enrollment history and trends, and we continue to show growth, averaging a little over 225 students per year. Here's our preliminary levy certification, and we're showing there are very few changes from the preliminary levy, but I do want to point out those specific ones that have changed, and the first one is the second line, the equity levy. That's gone down. When the voters approved our additional operating levy, that increased that amount. And so when you look at our equity levy, that compares us to the 95th, from the 5th to the 95th percentile. And so we increased a little bit, which means we receive less money in that area. The other long-term facility maintenance changed slightly. That was an adjustment in our long-term facility maintenance. And then you can see the biggest one is our levy referendums went from 5.3 million to 7.7. So that's an increase of $2.6 million. And then there was a slight adjustment in our leased facilities as well. So overall, in the general fund, that increased 21.48%. For our community service fund, there was no change from the preliminary levy. And then if we look at the debt service fund, there's a slight change. There's a change from the preliminary levy, and I did make an adjustment. I was showing some alternative facilities was shown in the debt service, and it should not have been. It should have been showing in our building bonds. And so I just changed the bucket, in essence, of where that money is showing. So if you look at our building bonds, they're going up an additional $2.5 million from last year. And our long-term facility maintenance went up slightly, about $80,000. And then we did have we showed on our preliminary levy a reduction in debt excess of about $570,000, and that's reduced now to $482,000. And the reason for that is we have to have 5% in our fund balance, and so that reduction, because our bond amount went up, we have to have 5% of that total bond amount in there, and so that went down slightly, just so we remain at 105% in that account, in that fund by law. And so you can see, due to the voter approved again in that total debt service fund, that one is going up 16.67% from the previous year. But I did show at the very bottom the total dollar difference from the preliminary, and then the additional from the final due to the voter approved building bond and the operating levy, and then the total. So the dollar difference from last year's $5,383,574 for a total increase of 18.57%. And you can see, again, I'm showing each of the funds here, the total general fund, the community service fund, and the debt service fund. A little bit about how this breaks down. 66% of our levy is voter approved. 19% of our total levy is determined by the state, and 15% is at local discretion. Here's our 9-year levy history, going back to 2009-10, and then you can see we've maintained pretty steadily those increases, small increase, either a decrease or a small increase, but this year, due to the voter approved, it did go up significantly, as we expected that it would. Our home values in District 719, the average home value is $326,300, and the median value is $287,900. Here's one of the things that's really different from us than the counties and the cities is that usually when you're levying, this levy is for 2018, and most of the time their budgets are on the same calendar year. And so when they're showing their budget, they're showing the budget that levy affects. For us, the levy affects next year's budget, so the 18-19 school year budget. It does not affect this year's budget, and so you're not seeing any adjustments to our budget due to those items. You will see the, when we sell the bonds, that we'll have to come back and make an adjustment for that piece of that. But as far as the other pieces of that budget, you'll see that in next year's budget. The $250 per pupil unit in the general fund, and then the debt service as well. So this is what was proposed from our work session for the general fund. And you can see that our fund balance is a little over $13.5 million. And that's for the general fund. For the food service fund, that's made some slight changes and additional expenditures. And then our community education fund, we're still within that fund balance of less than 25% as well. And the remaining ones are staying pretty steady. Any questions? I do want to talk about this tax levy calendar. The board must certify a final levy by December 29th. And then the district has to notify the MDE and the county by January 8th of that approval. Any questions? A lot of information in here.
Are there any questions from board for Julie? I have one. Which line items in the final budget do you see that you'll have to come back and do changes for the board based on the bond sale? Which line items in the final proposed budget? Would it be for the long-term facilities maintenance?
It'll be under total